Hello, sweetheart. It's just me. I was sitting here, watching the rain trace little rivers down the glass, and a thought came to me. A memory I've carried for so long. It feels like a stone in my chest. I've told myself 1,000 times to let it go, to let the water wash it away, like it's washing this window. But some things just need to be told. So, I'm going to tell you a story tonight. It's a story about a kitchen, a quiet Sunday, and a phone call that I thought would end my world. But as I sit here now, I know it was really the call that finally let me begin to live. When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. You might think that's strange. You might think a mother, asked to walk out of her son's front door, would crumble. And for a moment, deep down where no one could see, I did. My hands started to shake, and my throat felt like it was filled with sand. But I looked at her face, so tight and determined, and then I looked past her, at my son, standing in the doorway of the living room, not saying a word. And something in me, it just shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness, not right then. It was a strange, quiet peace. Because in that silence, in a silence, I finally understood something I had been running from for years. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was tired. So tired of trying to hold onto something that was already gone. Gathered my things. My purse, the half-knitted baby blanket I was working on for a neighbor's new grandchild, the book I'd been reading. I walked past her, and I walked past him. I didn't say a word. I walked out to my old sedan, the one my husband, God rest his soul, bought me 10 years ago. I got in, I started the engine, and I drove the 45 minutes back to my little house. The house that now felt bigger and emptier than it ever had. The whole way home, I didn't cry. I just drove, watching the trees go by, watching the sun start to dip low in the sky, painting. Everything in shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful, you know? Even when my heart felt like it was breaking into 1,000 tiny pieces, the world outside my window was still so beautiful. That was the day I started to learn that holding on and letting go are sometimes the exact same thing. But to understand that, you have to go back. You have to go back to the beginning, to the Sunday dinners and the laughter, to the woman I was before I knew how to smile at goodbye. That my name is Eleanor. But my son, my only child, has called me Mama L since he was a little boy, barely tall enough to reach the kitchen counter. He would stand on his tiptoes, trying to see what I was stirring in the big pot on the stove, and he'd say, "Mama L, what's for dinner?" I was Mama L to him, to his friends who would pile into our car for trips to the lake, and later, to his wife, Sarah. It was a name I wore like a warm blanket. It made me feel needed. My life was simple. It was built around two things. My family and my home. My husband, David, was a quiet man. A good man. He worked at the hardware store for 35 years, and every evening, he'd come home, wash his hands in the mudroom sink, and sit at the head of our kitchen table. He wasn't one for grand speeches or big shows of affection. His love was in the steady way he paid the bills, the way he fixed the squeaky step on the porch without me ever having to ask, the way he'd reach for my hand in the dark of the movie theater. We had a good life, a full life, and the center of that life, the very heart of it, was our son, Michael. From the moment he was born, with his tiny, clenched fists and his loud, demanding cry, he was my whole world. I used to rock him for hours in the old wooden rocker by the window, humming songs my own mother hummed to me. I watched him take his first steps in our backyard, a clumsy, determined waddle towards the rose bushes. I watched him ride his bike, for the first time, his little face a mixture of terror and pure joy. Every milestone, every scraped knee, every school play, it was all etched into the walls of our home. When David got sick, it was Michael who held my hand at the hospital. He was 23 then, a young man with his father's steady eyes and my stubborn chin. He sat with me through the long nights, bringing me coffee that had gone cold, telling me stories about work to try and make me laugh. When David passed, it was Michael's arm around my shoulder at the funeral, his voice telling me, "I've got you, Mama L." And he did. For a while, he was all I had. He met Sarah about a year later. She was a pharmacist at the big chain store on the other side of town. She was smart, organized, and ambitious. I remember the first time he brought her to Sunday dinner. She walked into my kitchen and looked around, her eyes scanning the cluttered countertops, the mismatched chairs, the pile of mail by the phone. She didn't say anything, but I saw her notice. She was very polite, very proper. She called me Mrs. Thompson until Michael told her to stop. She complimented my roast chicken, but she only ate a small piece of the breast, leaving the skin and the dark meat on her plate. I thought, she's just a city girl. It's fine. My Michael seemed happy. And for a mother, seeing your child happy is like watching the sun come out after a long, cold winter. They got married in a beautiful hotel downtown. It wasn't the small church ceremony I had always pictured, but it was elegant. Everything was white and silver. Sarah wore a stunning dress. She planned everything down to the last detail. I felt a little out of place in my lavender dress, the one I'd bought at the department store, but I was happy. I watched them cut the cake, and I whispered a prayer to David, telling him our boy was going to be all right. After the wedding, they bought a house. A new house in a new development, with an open floor plan and granite countertops. It was the kind of house you see in magazines. Sarah decorated it herself. Everything was in its place. A place for everything. It was beautiful, and it was nothing like my home. My home, the one David and I built, had history in its walls. There was a permanent coffee stain on the rug from when Michael was 2, and, through his sippy cup, the cabinets in the kitchen were warped from the steam of 1,000 pots of soup. The back door stuck in the summer, and you had to give it a good push with your hip to get it open. It was imperfect. It was ours. At first, I was invited over often. I'd go for dinner, or to watch a game. But I started to feel like I was a guest in my own son's life. I'd try to help in the kitchen like I always did, and Sarah would gently take the spoon from my hand. "It's okay, Eleanor, I've got it," she'd say, with a tight smile. I'd try to bring over some of my famous apple pie, and she'd place it in the refrigerator, saying, "We'll save it for later." And I'd never see it again. I'd try to tell a funny story about Michael when he was a boy, about the time he tried to give the neighbor's cat a bath, and Michael would shift uncomfortably in his seat, and Sarah would give a little, polite laugh that didn't reach her eyes. The stories I treasured, the ones that made me feel connected to him, seemed to embarrass him now. They were relics of a life she wasn't a part of. A life she was slowly, quietly, trying to replace. I told myself it was fine. I told myself she was just trying to build her own family, her own traditions. I was the mother-in-law. I needed to learn my place. And my place, it seemed, was not in her kitchen, not with my stories, not with my pie. My place was at Sunday dinner. For exactly 2 hours. From 1 to 3. And I had to be okay with that. So I made myself okay with it. I shrunk myself down to fit into the space she had made for me. For a few years, we found a rhythm. A fragile, carefully constructed rhythm. Sunday at 1 o'clock, I would arrive at their pristine house. I would knock, even though I knew I didn't need to. Michael would open the door, give me a quick hug, and say, "Hey, Mama L." Sarah would be in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a meal that was always delicious, always perfectly presented, and always made me feel like I was a guest, not family. We would eat at the big dining table, using the good napkins. We would talk about Michael's work, about Sarah's new fitness class, about the new car they were thinking of buying. The conversation was always pleasant. It was always surface. I would ask about their friends, about their plans for the summer, about anything that felt safe. I learned not to bring up the past. I learned not to bring up David. I learned not to bring up the old neighborhood. And then, the most wonderful thing happened. Sarah was pregnant. I'll never forget the phone call. Michael's voice was shaking. "Mama L," he said, "you're going to be a grandmother." For the first time in years, I let myself feel pure, unbridled joy. All the rules, all the distance, it all melted away in that moment. I cried. I laughed. I went to the store and bought the softest yellow yarn I could find. I was going to knit a baby blanket, the same pattern my mother used for me. I was going to be needed again. I tried so hard to be good. I tried to follow their rules. I called before coming over. I brought the baby blanket, laying it gently in the crib they had set up in the nursery. Sarah looked at it, ran her fingers over the stitches, and said, "Oh, Eleanor, That's so thoughtful. We're going with a gray and white theme for the nursery, but this will be perfect for the diaper bag. I smiled. Gray and white, not yellow. That was fine. The blanket was for the baby, not for the nursery. The baby wouldn't care. But the anxiety I felt during that pregnancy was like a low hum in the back of my mind. I saw Sarah less and less. Sunday dinners became shorter. She was tired, I understood. I offered to come over and help, to clean, to cook, so she could rest. Michael would say, "Thanks, Mama L, but we're good." Sarah has a system. A system. That word. Everything was a system. A plan. A schedule. And I was never on it. When the baby came, a beautiful girl they named Lily, I was at the hospital. I waited in the waiting room for 8 hours. When they finally let me in, Sarah was in the bed, looking exhausted but triumphant. Michael was holding this tiny, perfect bundle. I walked over, my heart so full it could burst. "Oh, she's beautiful," I whispered. I reached out my hand to touch her cheek, that impossibly soft newborn skin. And Sarah said, "Oh, Eleanor, could you maybe wash your hands first? There's sanitizer by the door." I froze. My hand hovered in the air. I looked at my hands. They were clean. I had washed them in the waiting room bathroom not 10 minutes earlier. But I just nodded. "Of course, dear," I said. I walked back to the door, pumped the cold, sharp-smelling sanitizer into my hands, and rubbed it in. I walked back and stood at the foot of the bed, my hands clasped in front of me. I didn't try to hold her. I just looked, and in that moment, something shifted. The low hum of anxiety became a clear, sharp note. I was no longer family. I was a visitor. A visitor who had to sanitize before touching the baby. A visitor who was a potential threat. I tried to push the feeling down. "It's the hormones," I told myself. "It's a new mother's anxiety. It's normal. I just need to be patient. I need to be helpful." So I became the helper. I offered to come over and watch Lily, so Sarah could nap. "I have a schedule, Eleanor, but thank you." I offered to bring over meals I had made. "We're trying to eat cleaner, but thank you so much." I offered to take Lily for a walk in the stroller. "We have a specific time for her walk. It's part of her routine." "Thank you, though." Every no was delivered with a polite smile. Every thank you was a closed door. And Michael was quiet. He would watch these exchanges from the corner of the room or from the kitchen, his face a mask of neutrality. He never said, "Let her hold the baby, Sarah." He never said, "My mom's cooking is the best, let her bring us some." He was a peacekeeper. But in keeping the peace with her, he was slowly, silently, breaking my heart. The rules got stricter. The distance grew wider. I stopped offering. I would just show up for Sunday dinner, bring a small gift for Lily, and sit in my designated spot at the table. I stopped telling my stories. I stopped asking about their lives. I became a ghost at the table. A quiet, well-behaved ghost. I would go home afterward and sit in my own kitchen, the one with the warped cabinets and the sticky back door, and I would feel so alone. I would talk to David. I'd tell him, "I don't know what to do, David. I don't know how to be what they want me to be." And the silence of the house would be his only answer. It was a rainy Sunday, a few months after Lily's first birthday. The kind of rain that starts in the morning and just keeps going, turning the sky a soft, bruised purple. I was running a little late. My old car had been acting up, and it took me an extra few minutes to get it started. I arrived at their house at 10 minutes past 1. I knocked. Michael opened the door. His face was different that day. It wasn't his usual neutral mask. He looked stressed. His jaw was tight. "Hey, Mama L," he said, his voice clipped. "We're eating in a few. Sarah's just getting Lily down for her nap." "Oh, I'm sorry I'm a little late," I said, stepping inside, shaking the rain from my umbrella. The old car is giving me trouble again. I walked into the living room. Sarah was coming down the hallway, closing the nursery door softly behind her. She turned and saw me. Her smile was gone. In its place was the same tight, determined look I would see later, the one that would tell me to leave. "Eleanor," she said. Her voice was low, controlled. "You're late." "I know, honey. I'm so sorry. My car." Lily's entire schedule is thrown off now, she interrupted, her voice rising just a fraction. Her nap time is exactly 1 o'clock. When you're late, it means we have to wait to start lunch, which means her feeding time gets shifted, and now she's going to be off for the rest of the day. Possibly the rest of the week. I stood there, holding my wet umbrella, water dripping onto their perfect, cream-colored rug. I was wearing my raincoat, my old, sensible raincoat that had a small tear in the pocket. I felt so out of place. So large. So messy. I'm sorry, I said again, my voice small. I didn't think. No, she said, and her voice was shaking now. No, you didn't think. You never think about the structure, Eleanor. You never think about what we need. You just show up whenever you want with your things and your stories and your expectations. It's too much. I looked at Michael. He was standing by the couch, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He was looking at the floor. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Michael, I said, my voice a plea. I didn't mean to. It's not just about today, Eleanor. Sarah cried. It's every day. It's the constant calls, the unsolicited advice, the feeling that I have to manage you on top of everything else. This is my home. This is my family. And I need you to respect that. The word echoed in the quiet room. My family. She had said it. My family. Not ours. Hers. And Michael was letting her. He was standing there, silent, letting her tell his mother that she was a burden, that her love was too much, that her presence was a problem to be managed. I felt a tear slip down my cheek. I wiped it away quickly, hoping no one saw. But Sarah saw. Her eyes narrowed. Don't do that, she said, her voice sharp. Don't make yourself the victim. You come into our home, and you make me feel like the bad guy for wanting a predictable life for my child. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend myself, to say I was sorry 1,000 times over, but no words came. I just looked at her, and then I looked at my son. I looked at the man I had rocked as a baby, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose heart I had held after his father died. And he wouldn't look at me. He wouldn't even look at me. And in that silence, the strange peace settled over me. It was like a cold wave, washing away the panic, the desperation, the need to be accepted. I saw it all so clearly. I was fighting for a place in a family that didn't want me. I was trying to hold on to a son who was no longer mine. He had made his choice, not with words, but with his silence. He had chosen her. He had chosen the peace in his own home over his mother. And while that knowledge was a knife in my heart, it also freed me that I took a deep breath. I looked at Sarah. I didn't feel anger toward her. I felt a strange, weary understanding. She was a mother, fiercely protecting her nest. I had been the same way once. Okay, I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. Sarah blinked. She had been gearing up for a fight. What? Okay, I repeated. I'll leave. I walked to the hall closet, got my purse. I walked back to the living room and picked up the half-knitted baby blanket I had brought to show Sarah, the one for the neighbor's new grandchild. I put it in my bag. I picked up my book. I was moving slowly, deliberately. I was saying goodbye. I walked to the front door. I opened it, and the cool, damp air hit my face. I turned back one last time. Sarah was standing in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed, a mixture of triumph and confusion on her face. Michael was still by the couch, his head now slightly raised. He was watching me. Finally. Michael, I said softly. He flinched. Mama. I didn't let him finish. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need an excuse. I just needed him to see me one last time. To see the woman who loved him more than he would ever know. I love you, I said. And I will always be your mother. But I am going to go home now. And then I smiled. It was a sad smile, I'm sure. A tired smile, but it was real. I closed the door behind me. I walked to my car, got in and started the engine. And as I pulled away from the curb, the tears finally came. They fell hot and fast, blurring my vision, mixing with the rain on my face. I cried for the little boy I used to hold in my arms. I cried for the son I felt I had lost. I cried for the grandmother I had dreamed of being, the one who would bake cookies and tell stories and watch her granddaughter grow. I cried until my throat was raw and my eyes were swollen. And then, somewhere on the familiar road that led back to my house, the crying stopped. And the peace, that strange, cold peace from the living room, settled back into my bones. It wasn't warmth, but it was a start. The first week was the hardest. It was a silence I had to learn to live with. Not the silence of a house, but the silence of a phone that didn't ring. I'd find myself. Looked at it for 3 days. My birthday was a week before Lily's. No card had come for me. No call. Nothing. And that was okay. I had learned to be okay with the silence. But this was a sound. A faint, tentative sound. I thought about going. I imagined myself at the park, standing on the edge of the party, an outsider looking in. I imagined the awkwardness, the polite smiles, the feeling of not belonging. I almost didn't go. I almost wrote back a polite note declining. But then I thought of Lily. I thought of her chubby little hands, her curious eyes. She was innocent in all of this. She deserved to know her grandmother. Not a ghost at the table, but her grandmother, Went. I got there at 10 o'clock exactly. I wore a simple blue dress, my hair pinned back. I brought a gift, a set of wooden blocks I had found at a little toy store. I walked into the park and I saw them. Michael was setting up a banner on a picnic table. Sarah was arranging cupcakes on a stand. And Lily was toddling around on the grass, a little unsteady, laughing at a butterfly. I stopped a few feet away. Michael looked up and saw me first. His face went through a series of emotions.
Surprise.
A flicker of guilt. And then, something I hadn't seen in a long time. A softness. He gave me a small, hesitant nod. Sarah followed his gaze.
She saw me.
Her face was unreadable for a moment. She stood up straight, smoothing her hands on her jeans. I walked over to them. I didn't say I'm sorry. I didn't say I miss you. I just held out the gift. For Lily, I said, my voice quiet. Happy birthday. Sarah took it. She looked at the simple wooden blocks, not the latest electronic toy, not something from her approved list. She ran her finger over one of them. They're beautiful, Eleanor, she said. Her voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was neutral. An open door. Lily came running up then, grabbing her mother's leg. She looked up at me with those big, curious eyes. I knelt down. Looked at it for 3 days. My birthday was a week before Lily's. No card had come for me. No call. Nothing. And that was okay. I had learned to be okay with the silence. But this was a sound. A faint, tentative sound. I thought about going. I imagined myself at the park, standing on the edge of the party, an outsider looking in. I imagined the awkwardness, the polite smiles, the feeling of not belonging. I almost didn't go. I almost wrote back a polite note declining. But then I thought of Lily. I thought of her chubby little hands, her curious eyes. She was innocent in all of this. She deserved to know her grandmother. Not a ghost at the table, but her grandmother, Went. I got there at 10 o'clock exactly. I wore a simple blue dress, my hair pinned back. I brought a gift, a set of wooden blocks I had found at a little toy store. I walked into the park and I saw them. Michael was setting up a banner on a picnic table. Sarah was arranging cupcakes on a stand. And Lily was toddling around on the grass, a little unsteady, laughing at a butterfly. I stopped a few feet away. Michael looked up and saw me first. His face went through a series of emotions.
Surprise.
A flicker of guilt. And then, something I hadn't seen in a long time. A softness. He gave me a small, hesitant nod. Sarah followed his gaze.
She saw me.
Her face was unreadable for a moment. She stood up straight, smoothing her hands on her jeans. I walked over to them. I didn't say I'm sorry. I didn't say I miss you. I just held out the gift. For Lily, I said, my voice quiet. Happy birthday. Sarah took it. She looked at the simple wooden blocks, not the latest electronic toy, not something from her approved list. She ran her finger over one of them. They're beautiful, Eleanor, she said. Her voice wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. It was neutral. An open door. Lily came running up then, grabbing her mother's leg. She looked up at me with those big, curious eyes. I knelt down. So I was at her level. "Hello, Lily," I said. "I'm your grandma." She stared at me for a long moment, her little brow furrowed. Then she smiled. It was a wide, toothy, unself-conscious smile. And she held out her hand to me. She didn't know about schedules or rules or the heavy history between the adults. She just saw a woman with a kind face who had come to her party. And that was enough for her. I took her hand, and she pulled me toward the playground. I looked back at Michael and Sarah. Michael's eyes were glistening. Sarah was watching us, her arms still crossed, but her posture was different. It was less defensive, more watchful. I gave them a small smile, and then I let Lily lead me away. It wasn't as a reconciliation. It wasn't a new beginning. It was just a moment. But in that moment, the door that I had closed, the door that had been closed on me, was cracked open. Just a little. Just enough. That was a few years ago now. Lily is 5. She has a little brother now named David, after my David. I don't go to Sunday dinners. We have a different rhythm now. Sometimes Sarah will call and ask if I can watch the kids for an afternoon. Sometimes Michael will bring them over on a Saturday morning, and we'll spend the day in my garden or in my messy kitchen, baking cookies. He'll sit at my old table, the one with the scars and the coffee stains, and he'll tell me about his work, about his life. He looks more like his father every day. And sometimes, when Sarah is there, she'll sit in the living room with me and let me tell her a story about Michael when he was a boy. She doesn't interrupt. She doesn't make a polite excuse. She just listens. And I know she's trying. That's all any of us can do. I still have my peace. It's not the cold peace I found that rainy Sunday. It's a warmer one now. It's the peace of knowing I did the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I let go. And in letting go, I didn't lose my son. I gave him the space to become the man, the husband, the father he needed to be. And in that space, somehow there was room for me again. Not as the center of his world, but as a part of it. A quieter part. A more peaceful part that I think about that phone call sometimes. The one I was so terrified of. The one I thought would break me. But it wasn't a phone call that broke my heart. It was my own 2 hands, finally opening them, that set it free. You hold your children so tightly for so long that you forget you were ever meant to let them go. You forget that your job isn't to hold on forever. It's to love them so fiercely for so long that when the time comes, they can stand on their own 2 feet without you holding them up. And when they do, you have to learn to stand on your own, too. It's not easy. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it's easy. There are still days when I miss the little boy with the skinned knees, the one who needed me for everything. There are days when I look at the phone and wish it would ring more often. But I've filled my life. I have my roses. I have my books. I have my friend Ruth. And I have a granddaughter who runs up to me now and throws her arms around my neck and says, "Grandma, show me how to make the cookies with the sprinkles." So if you're listening to this and you're holding on to something too tight, someone too tight, a child, a love, a memory, I want you to just breathe. I want you to imagine your hands opening just a little, not to let go forever, just to see what happens. You might be surprised. You might find that what you were so afraid of losing, you never really had in the first place. Or you might find that in the letting go, you finally give it the room it needs to grow.
I'm Eleanor.
I'm a mother, a grandmother, a widow.